We're going to talk about some of the comments now that Steve Sarkeesian made and the confidence he resonated in those comments. So we're going to talk about comments made at SEC Media Day. He also went to the Texas High School Coaches Association, led some comments there as well that I'd like to get into. But again, hit that like button, subscribe down below. It really helps out the channel. I really appreciate it, guys. So Steve Sarkeesian's biggest comment that I hit on Mark's channel when it came up was he's super confident. He came out and said, Texas, this is the most talented and deepest team he's had at Texas. That speaks a lot of volume to me, guys, because Steve Sarkeesian, to me, so far has been honest at the University of Texas. He came out after the spring game, said, someone asked him, where do you want to get better? He straight up, flat out said what everyone in the fan base said, defensive line. We don't have enough bodies. We don't have enough top-end bodies there, especially the interior of the defensive line is what he was speaking about. He went out and added multiple guys after that. I believe Bill Norton came in after that. Jermaine Lole came in after that. I don't know if T.S. Sevilla did. He might have come in before. But overall, he said that. He's been clearly happy with it because he goes on and makes these comments. And when people look at that, they say, this team had 11 NFL picks from last year. And you'd say, wow, that's a lot. It was second in the country, only behind Michigan. But then when you go and look at mock drafts, recruiting rankings, they have a lot of guys that are going to play in the NFL on this roster. Quinn Ewers is going to be an NFL draft pick. Kelvin Banks is going to be an NFL draft pick. Isaiah Bond's going to be an NFL draft pick. I think Cedric Baxter and Jaden Blue are both NFL draft picks. We're already up to 5 on the offensive side of the ball. Gunnar Helm and Amari Niblack. Gunnar Helm's going to play in the NFL. That's 6. Amari Niblack is teetering for me. Like if he got injured and didn't produce this year, he could be out, but he's on his way to be that. That's 7. There's a slew of guys on the offensive line that are going to be draft picks. But if we're just talking about next year, I think Quinn Ewers is a draft pick, Kelvin Banks, Isaiah Bond. I think Silas Bolden gets drafted. I think Jaden Blue gets drafted. 5 or 6 guys we're up to. Cam Williams is going to get drafted. DJ Campbell, if he produces this year, will get drafted. Even if he had the same exact year as he did last year, DJ Campbell gets drafted. So we're up to 7? On the defensive side of the ball, Jermaine Lole comes in from Louisville. He had his best year at Arizona State and then was injured. If he can play up to 80% of his talent that he had at Arizona State or his production, he'll get drafted. And honestly, as long as he stays healthy, he'll be drafted. He'll probably be like his 5th, 6th round pick. I think Bill Norton is the same way, 5th, 6th round pick. The edges are loaded. This is the most loaded edge room Texas has had in a very long time. Barron Swell's an NFL player. Ethan Burke's an NFL player. Colin Simmons, I think, will be an NFL player. Hasn't played it down yet, but he's an upper 5-star recruit. Those guys tend to be NFL players if you just go look at past and the history of them. Let's see. Trey Moore, probably an NFL player. Colton Vostok, an NFL player. Andrew Bakuba is definitely an NFL player. He would have been a 3rd or 4th round pick if he came out last year. Malik Muhammad's an NFL player. Derek Williams is an NFL player. So I agree. 1 through 85, I think Texas is deeper than they were last year. Top-end talent, I think you can argue, and this year we'll have a lot to play in that. But when Sark comes out and says it and people jump off the cliff, I think they look at 11 NFL players, a lot going to the draft. There's no way that's possible. And I think it is possible. I really believe that. And I love the confidence because Steve Sarkeesian is a confident guy, no doubt about it. But he comes out and says the truth. He's not going to come out and say something he doesn't believe. So he clearly believes that. And belief, when resonated throughout the team, it's like when you throw a stone into water. It makes ripple effects. And I think even if let's say there's a tie between the team this year and last year, just that belief that he has in them now that could bump them over the top of that last year's team if it's even. I'm not saying if this year's team is 80% of last year's team, he could bump it over the top because I don't believe that. But do I think if they're even, those comments can? Absolutely. And I also think Quinn Ewers and his confidence can bump them over the top as well. So that was big for Steve Sarkeesian to come out and say that. He also made a couple comments about certain players, and they were unprompted, basically who stuck out, and he named them. Bill Norton came out of his mouth. He said he was really good, really big human being. He was more athletic and bigger than he thought he'd be. Jermaine Lole is actually having an effect, and I'm not surprised. Jermaine Lole is a very talented player. His big issue was health at the interior position. So if he can stay healthy, I think he's in for a pretty good year, honestly. Who else did he say? He said Trey Moore. Kelvin Banks also said this. Actually, that was Kelvin Banks. Trey Moore, it came out of Kelvin Banks' mouth. He said, the guy that gives him the most trouble in practice is Trey Moore. The guy had over 30 tackles for loss at UTSA. He had over 20 sacks in 2 years at UTSA the last 2 years. This guy's going to produce. He's a good player. He's going to play in the NFL. Can he be an SEC all-caliber player, which he was voted? He was voted third team. Possibly he could be. We'll see about that. Overall, let's see. He said Javion Cole was good in coverage. Ball hawk type of player. Needs to get better physically. So those are the guys that came out of his mouth. He also mentioned, and I think this was not hit on enough, the wide receiver position. He said he's going to play more wide receivers. That's not really in Sark's DNA. If you go back and look at it, he's usually playing 3, maximum 4 guys all the way back to his Alabama days. But I think he's going to play more guys. You have a rotation, and he named 7 guys. He named Silas Bolden. He named Isaiah Bond. He named Matthew Golden. That's 3. He named Ryan Wingo. 4. Ryan Niblett. 5. Jonte Cook. 6. DeAndre Moore. 7. So I think you're going to see those 7 guys play this year, and I think you're going to see obviously some guys are going to play more than others. If I had to guess, the main 4 guys that you're going to see play more than others play 75% of the snaps, while the other guys come in for a few snaps a game. It's probably going to be Ryan Wingo, Silas Bolden, Matthew Golden, Isaiah Bond, with Cook, Niblett, and Moore getting some touches in there. But overall, guys, I do think this is a more talented team. I like the names that came out of his mouth, especially when he mentioned, without saying, no one asked defensive line or interior defensive line. He just named Bill Norton and Jermaine Lole. So that's a big comment there from Sark. And I like that he's saying that he's going to play more wide receivers. And I do believe that. I think this is the most depth-wise is the best room he's ever had as a head coach or an offensive coordinator. Depth-wise. I'm not saying your top 3. I'm saying 1 through 7, I think this is the best depth he's had at the wide receiver position. I'm going to jump into your comments real quick, and then we'll get into one of the comments he made at the high school coaching summit. I like the part where he talked about how Texas is one of the few teams in realignment to get some of the rivalries back. Yeah, Jackson. Yeah, that is exciting because I think Texas might be one of the only 2 or 3 teams, including Oklahoma. I'm trying to think of someone else during realignment, like where you're leaving your old conference and joining a new one, where you're actually going to and playing old rivals. That's not happening. Oregon's not doing that. Washington's not doing that. USC's not doing that. Though I do think USC is going to have a rivalry with a Michigan or Ohio State, possibly a Penn State as well. But those aren't classic rivalries. Texas gets to renew classic rivalries, which is really rare and really cool in this new realignment age. So I really appreciate that he said that as well. I think he notices that. I think he notices that these are very important games to the University of Texas, but also to the University of Arkansas, to A&M, to Oklahoma, obviously, but Oklahoma will also be playing those teams. So it's very cool to see those renewed. It's going to be fun. Honestly, Arkansas, Oklahoma feels more natural than Arkansas, Missouri. I completely agree with that. John Neighbors from Natty Sports came on here, talked about Arkansas, and he agreed. Norman, I believe, is only a 2.5 hour drive for them. That's way closer than Missouri. So 100% way more of a natural rivalry. If Arkansas wins the first 3, it might turn into a bitter rivalry, Jackson. Yeah, I think it'll be interesting. Arkansas, that's the thing too, guys. I argued for the longest time Michigan-Ohio State wasn't the best rivalry in the country. I don't care how many people watched it because it was a nail versus a hammer. Ohio State beat the crap out of Michigan, and then Michigan's turned around. So that is definitely number 1 rivalry in college football. If Arkansas cannot win games consistently, like 2 to 3 out of every 10 years at least, versus Texas and Oklahoma, then it's not a rivalry. And I know Oklahoma fans will say, well, you haven't done that versus Oklahoma, but historically we have. That it's kind of been back and forth, and Oklahoma's definitely getting the better of us. And at least those games were close. That's another thing I forgot to mention. When Michigan played Ohio State and Ohio State was winning, Ohio State was killing Michigan constantly. So that was another thing as well. But a couple other comments he made. I know the fan base isn't going to like this, but he talked about recruiting. And he talked about how, listen, I'm not going to celebrate in the summer. The summer doesn't mean much to me. I'd rather celebrate in December when the ink is dried, basically. And he talked about how just chill out at this time a couple years back and down the road while Steve Sarkeesian has been here. There have been guys that have been somewhere else that flipped over. Cameron Williams, our right tackle. He's here because of that. Kelvin Banks, our left tackle. He's here because he flipped. Because of the coaching change, but it's still a flip. Anthony Hill flipped from A&M to Texas. Ty Anthony Smith went from Texas A&M to Texas. Jelani McDonald wasn't even being recruited by Texas at this time when he came in. And then at the end of that cycle, he came to Texas. So there's so many guys on this roster and other rosters across the country, probably 15 to 20%, that one was at another school at one time, committed. DeCorian Moore was committed to LSU, and now he's at Oregon. So I think we'll be fine. I'm not that worried about it. We're going to finish somewhere between 5 and 10. 10 would be disappointing, no doubt. But there's still a possibility for a top 5 class here. And I think Steve Sarkeesian should say, pump the brakes. Guys that are on other teams or in other teams' class right now will flip to us. And guess what, guys? He said this too. There's some guys in our class that will probably flip somewhere else. So this is nowhere near the finality of it. It's going to be interesting going forward. He also talked about how he doesn't want a signing day in the summer, and I completely agree with that, because it basically doesn't. If your senior year in high school doesn't matter at that point, that's just stupidity to me. There's so many guys that are late bloomers and play really well in their senior year, and they'd be losing out on major offers because of that, and they'd also be costing coaches the possibility of even recruiting them because of that. So that is just stupid to me. I don't understand why that idea has even been thrown out. Basically, high school, you can perform as a sophomore and junior, take off your senior year. It doesn't matter because you're already going to that school. You're already signed. So that's dumb to me. I think it would hurt high school football as well because of that. And he hit back against that as well. And I'm completely on board with Sark on that.